Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranas Chakshushrotram Balamindriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Ma Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranam Astu Anirakaranam Me Astu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharmaha Te Mai Santo Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So we are in Chandogya Upanishad, and last time we finished the 4th section. So we're in the 6th chapter, the 4th section. And let us just recap a little bit what happened. So we all know that this seeming creation, the origin of it is what we call Sat, or existence. And from Sat comes fire, then water, then earth, according to the Upanishads. And so they said that this whole world is really nothing but these 3 elements: fire, water, and earth. If we look at, let us say, the sun has, if we look at the sun, it's yellow, it has black spots, it has some red in it. So if we understand that that redness of the sun comes from the fire element, the whiteness of the sun, whiteness comes from the water element, the blackness of the sun comes from the food or earth element rather. And if we understand that this sun is nothing but fire, water, and earth, then there is no sun, because it's just fire, water, and earth. We're able to remove the sunness from the sun. The same way, when we look at the moon, if we understand that the redness of the moon comes from the fire element, the whiteness comes from the water element, and the blackness comes from the earth element. So the moon is just really fire, water, and earth. If you remove fire, water, and earth, there is no moon. So therefore, when we understand that this moon is just these elements, we remove the moonness from the moon. The same way we did this with lightning, right? So same way he did it with lightning. And he went through the whole thing where everything is nothing but these 3 elements: fire, water, earth. So therefore, he says, Trini Rupani Ityeva Satyam. Means these 3 elements are the only reality. But actually, we have to take it a step further, that this existence is the only reality. Because if we take these 3 elements and we remove existence, then these elements cease to exist. So then we come to the conclusion that the whole world is nothing but existence alone. Now, one more way to come to this is to look at the world. Just to look at the world and notice all of the things that we experience. Just take notice, whatever we experience. Let us say this pot here. There are three common things we will find with all these objects of experience. One is asatyam. Asatyam means that they're constantly changing from form to name to the shape it keeps changing. Second is, it is jada, or what we call, it's inert. It's an object of my experience. It is experienced. Because it's experienced, it is an object to existence consciousness. It's experienced. It cannot know on its own. It cannot be on its own. It requires consciousness, existence, for it to be known. Otherwise, it cannot be known. So therefore, because it requires something else to know it, it's called inert or jada. And we see here that this is also limited, or parichinna, means it is limited to this very shape and this very name. It's not in any other shape or name. It's not in any other place. So this pot is here, but it's not there. This pot is here now, but it's not going to be there later. So its shape, its form, it's limited to this particular space, this particular time. It's not unlimited. So these three things, the changing nature of the pot, the inert nature of the pot, and the limited nature of the pot, this is the same for all objects that we experience. They're all changing. They're all inert. They're all appearing to consciousness, or they need consciousness to be known, and they are limited. So if we try to deduce the cause of these things, what is the cause of changing, or what is the cause of change? Change cannot come from change. Because if change comes from change, change is already there. So change cannot come from change. Change cannot come from nothing. Nothing cannot produce change. So change has to come from something other than change. And therefore, change comes from the changeless. The same way, that which is inert, inertness cannot come from inertness, because then inertness is already there. So where did inertness come from? It cannot come from nothing. It has to come from something, and it has to come from something that's not inert. So it comes from consciousness. Limitations, limitedness, where does it come from? It cannot come from limitation, because then limitations are already there. It cannot come from nothing, so it has to come from something other than what's limited, or the unlimited. So when we look at this world that is changing, it has to come from changeless. It is inert, so it has to come from that which is not inert, which is consciousness. It is limited, so it has to come from that which is not limited, which is infinite or unlimited. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, as we see in our Upanishads. Just like sound cannot come from sound, right? Because then sound would already be there. Sound comes from something that's not sound, which is silence. Movement cannot come from movement. Movement comes from something that's not movement, which is stillness. So even logically speaking, if we deduce the cause of this world, what could it have come from? It has to be something other than this changing, inert, and limited object. And it also has to be something other than space and time. Because time has to come from something that didn't have time, right? Time had to, where did time come? It had to come from something that didn't have time. So therefore, it is timeless. Space had to come from something that didn't have space. It didn't just appear. So therefore, spaceless. So this timeless, spaceless awareness is existence, consciousness. It is Sat. And this forms the entire basis, the substratum for the whole world. This is the substratum on which the entire world of names and forms appears. So now, knowing this Sat, knowing that this is the substratum, these wise ones understood that whenever they saw anything, it is just existence. So in this pot is the changing nature of the pot, but in this pot is also clay. So they saw through the pot and understood that it is clay. And that's what made them wise. The definition of wisdom in the verses that we saw previously are people who are able to see through the world and understand its underlying substratum. And therefore, when they knew the substratum, they knew the cause of the world, they understood all of the effects. Because when somebody knows clay, then pot, pitcher, cup, everything is known to them. So for these wise people, and be it whether they were Mahashala, whether they were householders, or Mahashrotriya, whether they were learned scholars, they knew this truth. And therefore there was nothing unheard of, unthought of, and unknown to them. And this is the question that was asked to Śvetaketu. And this is the answer which the wise people understood, that there is nothing unknown, unheard, unthought of, because once we know the cause, once we know the substratum of the world, then everything is known. So this becomes very clear from verses or sections 1 to 4. Now, the Upanishad wants to tell us that same substratum of existence, of consciousness, of infinitude that's in the world is also the substratum of our own self. Because this Upanishad deals with Tat Tvam Asi. So we have seen Tat, right? Tat. Now we're going to see Tvam, or you, or me. So what is how do we come to existence is the substratum, consciousness is the substratum of our own being? So this is the line of thought that he takes up, right? So section 5, first mantra. Annam ashitam, tredha vidhiyate, tasya yastavishto dhatuhu, tatpurisham bhavati, yo madhyamaha, tanmamsam, yo anishtaha, tanmanaha. So what happens here now is that first he's going to show that just like in creation, we deduced everything first to fire, water, earth, and then we came to the substratum, which is existence. The same way, in our own individual beings, we'll deduce everything to fire, to water, to earth. So the food that we eat, annam is food here, representing the earth element. The food, ashitam, the food that we eat, tredha vidhiyate, can be divided into 3. Tasya yastavishta dhatuhu. So its grossest ingredient, the grossest ingredient of food, tatpurisham bhavati, that becomes the feces, or that's what we excrete out. Yo madhyamaha, the middle ingredient of food, tan mamsam, that becomes flesh. Ya anishtaha, and that which is the subtlest, tan manha, that becomes the mind. So in this section, we're clearly going to see that mind is matter. There is always this question or this phrase, mind or matter, right? We are going to see that mind is actually matter. He's saying that any food that we eat, that we actually eat, the subtlest portion of that food becomes the mind. The medium portion of that food becomes flesh. The grossest portion of that food becomes fecal matter. See, how is this possible, right? When we're eating, in the Bhagavad Gita also, it says here that there are certain types of food which affect our mind. The grossest, we all know, part of the food becomes fecal matter. That's greatly understood. We get it. The medium part of food becomes flesh. We also can, to an extent, understand that, because the more we eat, the more we grow, right? The less we eat, that we shrink. But this food becoming mind, or the subtle essence of food becoming mind, how is that possible? So in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse 8, I'll just read this verse and I'll explain. Ayus sattva balarogya sukha priti vivardhanaha rasya snigdha sthira ridvyaha ahara satvika priyaha. It says here that food is three types: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And these foods have a direct impact on the mind. So we can see, when we eat healthy and we eat light, we feel great, we feel fresh. When we have coffee, the mind gets very agitated and hyper. When somebody drinks liquor, then they come into tamas. They lose their sense of discrimination, of viveka, of discernment. So all foods we see have an effect on the mind. If we eat something spicy, something that's too hot, the mind also it acts up. If we eat something that's rotten, that's stale, the mind also becomes very dull. So in this verse that I read out, this talks about the sattvic kind of food, because these types of food affect our mind. So ayuhu means the type of food that increases lifespan, longevity. Ayus sattva, the type of food that is pure. Pure means that it's cooked in a proper vessel, a proper dish, a proper place. Because sometimes if food is cooked in an unclean place, that also affects the food. Bala, food that makes us strong, not weak, not drained out. Arogya, food that's also healthy, that it promotes good health. Sukha, food that makes us feel light and joyous. Preeti, food that's also delightful to look at. It should also be delightful to look at, not that it's just, some clump there. Vivardhana, it increases, the food that increases all of these, as well as rasyaha, food that is juicy, that is savory. Snigdhaha, food that has some oil content, not something too dry. Sthira, food that is substantial, means that is absorbed by our body, that whose nutrients or which nutrients are absorbed by our body. Ridhyaha, that's agreeable to our system. Aharaha satvika priyaha. This kind of food, it contributes to a sattvic mind. So even, even the place that is where we cook food, even the person who's cooking food, let's say if the person who's cooking food is quite sad or quite drained, that also affects the food. If the person who's cooking food is very delightful and happy, that also affects the food. So by what we eat, the food that we eat, our mind is made. This could be the reason in Mahabharata why when Sri Krishna went to Duryodhana's palace to give him the message that they want to avoid the war, and Duryodhana asked him to eat in his palace, he said, no, I'm not going to eat in the palace. Although Duryodhana had a great, feast and everything prepared, Sri Krishna said, I'm not going to eat there. I'm going to eat in the house of Vidura. So therefore, he says, in you, coming back to Śvetaketu, he says, in you now, that there's that food element. And that food element makes up not only your body, but your mind. Food element or earth element. That earth element in you. It's there in the world, but it's also in you and in me. And it makes up the body. It makes up the mind. So outside is matter. Inside is also matter. Now, he says the same thing. Now we'll go to the next element. Next element is water element, right? So mantra number 2. Apaha pitaha, apaha pitaha, tredha vidhiyante, tredha vidhiyante, tasam yastavishto dhatuhu, tasam yastavishto dhatuhu, tanmutram bhavati, tanmutram bhavati, yo madhyamaha, tallohitam, tallohitam, yo anishtaha, sapranaha, sapranaha. So he says, apaha, water, pitaha, water when drunk, tredha vidhiyante, it becomes divided into 3 parts. So just like food is divided into 3 parts, water is divided into 3 parts. Tasam, it's yastavishto dhatuhu, its grossest ingredient, tanmutram bhavati, is urine. So it passes as urine, the grossest ingredient of water. Yo madhyamaha, the middle ingredient, tallohitam, is blood. Yo anishtaha, that which is the subtlest of that water, sapranaha, is prana. So that water, so in us, in our body and mind is food, the food element. In our body and mind is also the water element, our body, or rather our prāṇas. Our body and prāṇas is the water element. The grossest one becomes urine. The middling one becomes blood. And the subtlest one becomes prana. And so that's why whenever scientists want to look for life, to see if life is in another planet or in another place, they'll always look for a body of water. Because wherever there's a body of water, life can be sustained. That's why also when we take a bath, we feel so refreshed. It's like a new life, right? Snanam. Or in our temples, there's always a river. In a lot of temples, there's a river by where we dip into before we go to the temple, because it rejuvenates our prana. Our prana means our vital air, rejuvenates that. And even when we perform the ritualistic puja, we invoke all the sacred waters to come into a cup of water. And that gives us new energy, vitality, life. So he says this water is the prana. The subtlest aspect of water is prana. So again, some people think that Prana is actually the absolute reality. Why? Because when the pranas, these vital airs, are gone from the body, then a person dies. When the pranas are still there, then the person is alive. But the pranas, again, are inert. So here, just like we understood in the first mantra, the mind is matter. It's made of food. Pranas are also matter. They're made of water. So they are inert. They are insentient. They cannot be the absolute reality. Now, he's going to go to the fire element. Okay? So this is the third mantra now. Tejo ashitam, tejo ashitam, tredha vidhiyate, tredha vidhiyate, tasya yastavishto dhatuhu, tasya yastavishto dhatuhu, tadasthi bhavati, tadasthi bhavati, yo madhyamaha, samajja, samajja, yo anishtaha, savak, savak. So here he says, tejo ashitam, that fire that we eat. So now everyone's going to think that we don't eat fire. It's true, we don't eat fire. The idea here is, if we look at a plant absorbs heat from the sun. It absorbs water from the rain, and it absorbs earth from the soil. So if you look at a plant, it has all of these three elements: fire, water, earth. The heat that's absorbed by the plant, it turns into oil. So that's how we have these plants like this aloe vera oil, aloe plant, or in the nuts that come out from plants, they have oils in them. And in the vegetables that come out from plants, there's water content in the vegetables. So there's some vegetables that have more water content than others. And then, of course, there's the earth or the solid component. So when we say tejo ashitam here, eating fire, what we really mean is eating oil, because that sunlight or that sun, when the plant absorbs it, the plant converts that to oil. Just like if somebody has solar panels, they're able to sort of convert that light into electricity. So too, plants have that capacity or that ability. And in eating that oil, ghee, butter, things like this, then that represents the fire element. And this fire element, oil, ghee, butter, tredha vidhiyate, it becomes divided into three. Tasya, of this fire element, yastavishto dhatuhu, the grossest form of it, tad asthi bhavati, it forms our bones. That's why they say if you want to eat ghee, eat something that can lubricate our joints, because it will really help our body. Yo madhyamaha samajja, that middle part of that fire element or that ghee, oil, etc., forms the bone marrow. Then yo anishtaha, in that subtle part of oil, ghee, etc., savak, it becomes our speech. So that's why when people are singing, those who are singers, those who chant the Vedic mantras, they're told to drink a lot of ghee, because that helps their voice become stronger and louder and better. And not that some people say there's a lot of cholesterol, but if you're chanting, then all of that is burnt. All of that is burnt out. So those who are speaking a lot, they're supposed to drink a lot of ghee. So in this way now, even our karmendriyas, our speech, our faculty of grasping, of locomotion, of excretion, of reproduction, This speech represents all of it. That's also made up of matter. So what we have seen in these three mantras, he will summarize in the fourth mantra, is that this fire, water, earth that we see outside in the world, that fire, water, earth is also inside. That fire, water, earth is also inside. And not inside only in the body, not only in the gross body, which is, it's quite obvious that in my gross body there is earth, in my gross body there's water, this we know, and in the gross body there is fire, but also in the subtle body, that this mind is not consciousness as what some people would think. It is matter. This is also earth. These pranas that I have, they're also just water. And this speech that I have, that's also fire. So my entire being can be reduced to also these three elements. Not only the world can be reduced to these three elements, but my being, and in fact, all beings can be reduced to these three elements. Now, a question comes here as to, how about, things like animals like rats? Let's say rats, they eat solid food, but they're not drinking water, maybe. Or what about fish? They're always in the water, but they're not having ghee. But how is it that rats also have a mind, they have prāṇas, and they have some speech, they have their own language? And fish, even if they're just in water and they may be eating other fish, they're not necessarily having ghee, they have their own speech. How is that possible? Because in this process of Trivrit Karanam we saw, where those three elements combine together, in earth, you have 50% of earth, then 25% of water, 25% of fire, like that. And water, 50% of water, 25% of earth, 25%. And fire, 50% fire, 25% earth, 25% water. So they're all a combination. And if you really look at it, we feel like we are individual, right? We feel like, oh, this is me, I'm an individual. But just think, anytime we're disconnected from these greater elements, we suffer. When we are disconnected from the heat element outside, what happens? We could freeze to death, right? There's no heater, we will freeze to death. So we have to be connected to heat. If we are not connected to the water element, if we don't have any water in our system, then we will die of thirst. If we are not connected to the earth element, if we don't have any food, then we would die of hunger. So though we think that we may exist as individual beings, whenever we're disconnected from any of the total elements, be it heat, be it water, be it food, we cannot exist. And what to talk about air? When we're disconnected from air, we feel we're suffocated. Okay? So therefore, now in the next mantra, he summarizes in the fourth mantra, we'll read that. Annamayam hi somya manaha, Annamayam hi somya manaha, Apomaya prāṇah, Apomaya prāṇah, Tejomayi vāgiti, Tejomayi vāgiti, Guya eva ma bhagavan, Guya eva ma bhagavan, Vignāpayatu iti, Vignāpayatu iti, Tatha somyeti hovacha, Tatha somyeti hovacha. So therefore, what happens is now the conclusion of the first three mantras, that Annamayam hi somya manha, that, O Somya. Somya is the name of a dear name, nickname for Śvetaketu. O Śvetaketu, this mind, this manaha is nothing but annamaya. It's a product of food. This mind is nothing but matter. Apomaya prānaha. These vital airs are nothing but apomaya, a product of water. Because without water, our prāṇas won't work. That's why whenever we're so tired and exhausted, we feel our energy completely drained. And when we drink a cup of water, we're rejuvenated immediately. Tejomayi vag iti. And this speech is nothing but the product of the fire element. And so he says this. This is what Uddālaka Ṛṣi tells his son, Śvetaketu. This iti, when you see iti, it's like a close quotation mark. And so Śvetaketu says, Bhuya eva ma bhagavan vignāpayatu. He says, please again tell me, because I'm not getting it. He says, please again explain this to me. It's not clear to me. How is it that the subtlest of the earth matter becomes the mind, the subtlest of the water element becomes the prana, the subtlest of the fire element, how does that become speech? This is not clear to me. Tatha somya. Okay, all right, Śvetaketu. Iti. All right, Śvetaketu, he said. Ha uvacha, he said. So now Uddālaka Ṛṣi is going to again give Śvetaketu a series of examples to make it clearer. So the beauty of Uddālaka Ṛṣi here in this Upanishad is he keeps giving examples. He keeps giving examples to make everything clearer and clearer and clearer until it hits Śvetaketu. So now we're going to go to the sixth section. Mantra 1. Dadna somya madhyamanasya yo anima sa urdhva samudishati tatsarpir bhavati. So here Śvetaketu is wondering, when you eat food, you just eat it. How does it come into 3 different parts and 3 different places? I don't get that. When you eat food, you just eat it. When you drink water, you just drink it. When you have ghee, etc., you just take it. So what is this division and how does this actually happen? So here, dadna. Dadna means curd, yogurt. Dadna somya madhyamanasya, of that curd, of that, let us say, buttermilk that's churned. Yo anima, the subtlest part of it, sa urdhva samudishati. Sa urdhva means it comes up, samudishati, it rises. Tat saripir bhavati, and it becomes that butter. So when you're churning that buttermilk, etc., when you're churning that, what happens is slowly that butter comes and rises on top. So that whole thing you're churning, it rises on top. And that, the way that rises on top, the same way the food that is churned, that is digested, a portion of it rises on top. And that's how the mind is made. So he says in mantra 2, Evameva khalu somya, annasya ashyamanasya, yo anima, sa urdhva samudishati, tanmano bhavati. So he says, evameva, the same way indeed, O somya, annasya, of that food, ashyamanasya, that's eaten, yo anima, the subtlest portion of it, Sa urdhva samudishyati, it rises up, and that becomes the mind. Tan mano bhavati. So the question is, rises up, rises where? Where is the mind? So according to Vedanta, the home of the mind is in the heart. The home of the mind is in the heart. So supposedly that food rises up, and through the subtle, what we call nadis, these subtle openings, these nadis, that reaches the heart center, the subtle mind. It reaches the subtle mind in the heart center. And that's why when we say I, when we feel, we touch our hearts here. So the mind, the home of the mind is in the heart. Though it expresses in the brain or through the brain, the home of the mind is in the heart. That rises there. Then he says, okay, and what about the prāṇas? So, apam somya, piyamananam, yo anima, sa urdhva samudishati, sa prāṇo bhavati. So he says the same way, apam. Apam means for water. Piyamananam, that water which is drunk. Yo anima, that subtle part of that water. Sa urdhva samudishati, that rises up. Sa prāṇo bhavati, and it becomes the prana. So prana, again, the home of the pranas is in the nostrils, the area of the nostrils, the lungs, the respiratory function. So it rises up, so by which it becomes our breath, our vitality, our vital airs. So whatever water we drink, the subtle essence of it rises up, and that becomes our prana. The same example he's using, the churning of the buttermilk and how butter rises. The same way for food, that the subtlest rises becomes the mind. For water, the subtlest rises become the prana. Then the fire element. Tejasa somya, ashyamanasya, yo anima, sa urdhva samudishati, savag bhavati. So again, tejasa, of fire, means of that ghee, of the oil that we eat. Somya, ashyamanasya, of that which is eaten. The subtlest of it, sa urdhva samudishati, it rises, and it becomes vak, it becomes our speech. So this is how Uddālaka Ṛṣi explains this concept to Śvetaketu. And again, he repeats that food is, or the mind is nothing but made up of food. So we'll read this mantra, I'll translate it, and then he concludes that train of thought. Annamayam hi somya manaha, apomaya pranaha, tejomayi vagdi, bhuya eva ma bhagavan, vignapayat viti, tatha somyeti hovacha. So this way, Uddālaka Ṛṣi says, again, Śvetaketu, this is the message that I want to give you. Annamayam hi somya manaha. That mind is nothing but a product of food. Mind is nothing but a product of food. So whatever food that we eat, what the vessel that it's cooked, the person who cooked it, all of that has an effect on our mind. Now, somebody might ask the question that, what about these yogis? Because some of these yogis, they don't eat that much. They don't eat that much, and yet their minds are so sharp, so subtle, even more than ours. That's because they have the ability to absorb the nutrients directly from nature. While you and I need to eat a plant or need to eat something to absorb nutrients, a yogi whose mind is very subtle or who's very meditative, they're absorbing nutrients directly from nature. They don't have to eat. So we will find that the lives of saints and sages, there are some, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Ji or Anandamayi Ma, where they barely ate and they barely slept also. That's because through their intense yogic practice, they had the ability to just absorb nutrients without putting it through their own digestive system. So, Annamayam Visomyam, Apomaya Prana. These pranas are made of water. Tejomayi Vag Iti. This speech is made of fire. And Śvetaketu says again, now he will keep saying the same phrase again and again. Bhuya. Bhuya means again. Bhuya eva ma Bhagavan. He calls his father like, God, Bhagavan, someone who he reveres. He says, please again you tell me. Ma here is mom. Bhuya eva ma Bhagavan. Vijñāpayatu. Please again tell me. Please again enlighten me. Because now I'm understanding how the subtlest portion becomes the prana, becomes the speech. But this mind, how is the mind made up of food? Still, this connection, I'm not able to grasp. This is a little bit difficult for me. This is what Śvetaketu says. Tatha Somya. And Uddālaka Ṛṣi says, okay, no worries, don't worry. Iti hovacha. I'll give you another, not example now, but now Śvetaketu, Uddālaka Ṛṣi says, I'm going to give you an experiment. Because I gave you an example, I elaborated on everything. Now I'm going to take you through a live experiment so you yourself can see what this really means. So now let us go into the experiment. We will start the experiment. Little bit start. Okay. So we are in the 7th section. Shodashakalaha, Shodashakalaha, Somya, Somya, Purushaha, Purushaha, Panchadasha Ahani, Panchadasha Ahani, Ma Ashihi, Ma Ashihi, Kamam Apapibataha, Kamam Apapibaha, Apomaya prāṇah, Apomaya prāṇah, Napibato, Napibato, Vichetsyate iti, Vichetsyate iti. Okay, so here, Kamam apap or piba, Kamam apap, piba. He says here, now, take a look at yourself, Śvetaketu. You are Purusha. Purusha means you are a human being. You're a being. Now, in each human being, there are Shodasha Kalaha. Shodasha means 16. Kala means facets. So each human being, they say, has 16 facets. And in the commentary here, in your book, it is spoken of in this Prashna Upanishad and Aitri Upanishad. So I'll just read that so that we can get a kind of understanding. So in Prashna Upanishad, it says that each being has 16 aspects of the divine self. And the 16 aspects are prana or life, shraddha or faith, kham, space, vayu, air, jyoti, light, apa, water, prithvi, earth, indriyam, sense organ, mana, mind, annam, food, Dhiryam, vitality, tapa, austerity, mantra, incantations, karma, action, loka, fields of experiences, and nama, name. So according to Prashna Upanishad, each being has these 16 facets. Now, if we look at Aitri Upanishad, it talks about the being that has 16 mental capacities, which are manifestations of pure consciousness. So they are samjnanam, or sentience, ajnanam, agnanam, rulership, vijnanam, knowledge, prajnanam, presence of mind, medha, ability to understand and retain, drishti, perception, dhritihi, fortitude, matihi, thinking, manisha, independent thinking, jutihi, mental suffering, smritihi, memory, sankalpaha, ascertaining, kratuhu, resolution, asuhu, life-sustaining activity, kamaha, desire, and vashaha, passion. So whichever way you take it, this being, or each of us, we have 16 aspects. And it's like the moon, actually. We're very much in line with the moon, or in line with nature, because nature, the new moon, from the new moon to the full moon, it's 15 days, right? So that from the new moon becoming full moon, it's 15 days, and then you have to count that one extra day, so 16 days. So the same way, we have 16 aspects of us. So we are called Shodasha Kala, this being with 16 aspects. So now, this Uddālaka Ṛṣi tells his son, Panchadasha ahani, for 15 days. You have 16 aspects. For 15 days, ma ashihi, don't eat. Don't eat anything for 15 days. But kamam apaf piba means piba, drink water. Drink water, apaha, kamam, as much as you like. Drink as much water as you like. Apomaya prana, because remember, prana is nourished by water. So if you stop drinking water, the pranas will go. So don't eat for 15 days. Just drink as much water as you want, because nappibataha, if you don't drink it, vichetsyate, then your pranas will get cut off. So therefore, do this experiment. For 15 days, don't eat. So Śvetaketu says, okay, 15 days, I'm going to do it. 15 days, I'm not going to eat. So we'll just touch upon the next mantra to see what's happening to Śvetaketu, then more we'll take up next time. So the second mantra now, Saha Panchadasha ahani, Panchadasha ahani, na asha, atha, yenam upasasada, kim bravimi voho, iti, richasomya, yajumshi, samaniti, sahovacha, navema pratibhanti voho, iti. So Śvetaketu, as an obedient son, what did he do? This sa is Śvetaketu. Panchadasha ahani, for 15 days, for the duration of 15 days. Na asha means he did not eat. Atha, then, enam upasasada. Enam means to his father, he approached. He went to his father and he asked his father, Kim bravimi bhoho, what should I say? Now my 15 days have been completed. What should I say? And the father said, Okay, Somya, Śvetaketu, Richa, the Rig Veda, Yajurshi, the Yajur Veda, Samani, that Sama Veda. Why don't you say that? Why don't you chant that? Because before, the Vedic mantras were passed on through chanting. That's how they were preserved. And Śvetaketu had learned all of this in Gurukula. So his father said, come now and chant all of these Vedic mantras for me. And Śvetaketu said, Saha uvacha nave ma pratibhanti bhutto. That for me, ma here is mom, for me, na pratibhanti. They're not shining, they're not arising at all. That's what Śvetaketu said. So now, what this means is there's a direct link. What Uddālaka Ṛṣi was trying to tell Śvetaketu is there is a direct link between the mind and food. Because when you don't eat, when Śvetaketu did not eat, he could not remember anything. Could not remember how to chant the mantras. Therefore, when the cause, when the food is not there, the effect, the mind is not there. That mind of all of these aspects was not there. And so if it's the logic of presence and absence. If when food is there, the mind is there, and when food is not there, the mind is not there, then therefore the food is nothing but mind alone. Or mind is nothing but food alone. Therefore, mind is matter. And Uddālaka Ṛṣi now has proved his point, not only through examples, but through a live demo. That in the outer environment, there's fire, there's water, there's earth. Even in our body, in our mind, there is fire, there is water, there is earth. And slowly, as we come to see, he'll explain that the root or the substratum of the world is Sat, existence. The root or the substratum of us is also existence. Okay, so we will stop here. We'll say the closing prayer, and then if anybody has any questions, we can take them. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.